Okay, and it is 6:09. I'm going to call us to order, and Liz, I think, agreed to take minutes, so thank you, Liz. We always start with public comment, so anybody who's not a board member that wants to say something, please feel free. Okay, and also I think this group knows that we're pretty loose with comments throughout, so let's see. Okay, so approving the minutes, I just put them in the agenda now. They were not linked. I apologize for that. Really, it's Liz, Aaron, and my job to look at those and approve them. So unless there's anything either of you see, or if anybody else is looking at them and notices something that they want to mention that we should change, I'll take a motion to approve them. Liz? Great, thanks. Okay. And I know Erin is here, but she's just got to deal with something and is sort of listening in right now. So, but if you could put your digital thumb up so we can get approval to formally approve the minutes from January 3rd.
I approve.
Great, thank you. Okay. All right, so it's been a little while since we last met, and I've had some time to think a bit about our next meeting and spend some time fleshing out some of my thoughts around what this committee's role is and how we, what we're charged with doing, and how that then squares with our goals of, in general, having a really robust way that we're regularly connecting with our stakeholders, our community, which in the governance model we used are called owners. And then also thinking about what a racial and equity work plan might look like. And what I wish I had done, and I think I said this in my email, when we've had new folks join the group, I try to share a little bit about the group's work and what our function is and scope. And so I tried to do that after the fact with that document that I shared. So maybe I'll just, we can just start there with kind of reactions to that. Let's see, I think I called it just CEC, Community Engagement Committee notes. So yeah, what reactions did people have to, or questions about our purpose or focus or goals?
I had one thought about, I think it was the top one. I don't have the document in front of me, but it was about bringing the community input to help guide conversation. And it wasn't feedback, it was input. And I thought that was a, oh, thank you. I thought
You're
that
welcome.
was a I thought that was an important differentiation, because one of the things that you know, we kind of waver between is providing input maybe from our own communities as opposed to the larger community, and then feedback to certain proposals or certain ideas or certain things that we've done either through a survey or a thought exchange. So it felt to me like that the input, that we could use some of the tools that we've used for feedback for input. So as opposed to something that's a response to something from the board, something that's a little more open-ended, so that we can get it, like some of the people that are here and were here last time, who have ideas and who want to provide just provide the board and provide some things for the board to think about and for this committee to think about, and generally, and certainly specifically around the issue of equity. So I just felt like that was a really important differentiation for me, was that making sure that we have tools for gathering input as opposed to response. Does that make sense?
Boy, I think that makes a lot of sense, Kim. And I think that's a piece that this group has over time kind of gotten close to working on, and then we got working on more particular issues. But I think in addition to having tools for the community to be communicating with the board, I think we've done a little bit of talking, and I think we need to do more talking about building structures that have some sustainability and ongoing existence, so that rather than tools that people are accustomed to using to react to things, like you're saying, they are tools and structures that give people assurance that there's always going to be a way to provide input to the board on a whole host of important issues that community members feel strongly about. Those structures have really changed over time as a result of the consolidation of our districts. We used to have a board for every school, and that helped people feel that there was a person on every board that could get a message where it needed to go. And because in the wake of consolidation, the available structures have really changed. And I think it really is the work of this committee, in terms of meeting its charge from the board, to do some thinking about, as you said, the tools, and I'm saying also the structures that facilitate that input to be flowing well.
Other thoughts or reactions?
Well, I just had one, and again, there were a lot of different forms, so I took notes, and I'm not sure if this is exactly this form, but there was one part that, talked about this group being in a unique position to move equity efforts forward, to dismantle racism through policy and making responsibilities. But then I wasn't quite sure what it meant by public comments, and it looked like that was just a small portion of time. It sounds like that's shifting a little from what I'm hearing here right now. But also that it wasn't supposed to be personal, which I was curious about. What does that mean? Why is that? That was something I didn't understand.
I think maybe I need a little clarity, Jennifer. So I see in the notes document, I see what you're talking about, where I mentioned that probably the most tangible way the board can affect change is through policy, and making policies that then provide the kind of bones to what happens on the day-to-day operations of the schools. So that part I see in there. But tell me what you're talking about with the public part. Are you talking about public comment within a meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah. So, can you tell me a little bit more about?
It just says that the comments are not supposed to be personal, which I don't understand what that means.
Where are you seeing that?
The agenda.
Is it under at the bottom of the agenda under public?
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, so that's our agenda template that you're talking about for this particular meeting. Yeah, so I think it's I'm gonna hopefully get to what you're maybe asking about in a longer way. So so if you don't mind, but so public comment is a really I think like a little bit old school traditional way that public bodies invite community members to participate. But I would say that I think the whole board recognizes the limits to that public comment session. It is definitely, it's there, it's kind of standard format to have that on a public meeting agenda. But I think it is not designed to scratch the itch of giving people an opportunity for input. It's the way that we would want to get input or give people an opportunity to provide feedback in an ideal world actually would be on a regular, like Nancy was saying, sustainable basis that happens all the time. And sometimes if we haven't been providing those opportunities, then folks will participate in public comment. And almost always, I think it's pretty unsatisfactory for both the person commenting and the board because it's pretty limited amount of time. The format is such that we're not supposed to directly respond. It's very constricted and formulaic. And it's hard to really use that public comment space in a way that I think feels like people walk away feeling heard. So the little asterisk is just something we always put on our agenda when we put public comment on there, because we do have folks that might only engage with the board at that time. And just, we want folks to know that because it's a public meeting, you know, we ask that you abide by certain rules of kind of civility and discourse, and we have to keep it fairly limited in time because it's our business meeting. But the idea is that folks would find other more productive ways to share their thoughts and feelings with the board outside of that. I don't know if that helps at all.
Krista, maybe also if you could address the question about personal versus personnel in the last part of that statement. It's not that personal
Correct.
matters won't be heard by the board. It's
Right.
that personnel
Personnel.
matter, that is matters about particular staff who are employed by the school district.
Okay.
Right. And I don't know. Yeah, to be honest, I have not read this little paragraph that goes at the bottom of all of our agendas in a while to really look at that language. So as I'm reading it, I'm seeing public comments are encouraged and welcome. And they are, except that I would just say a lot of times, the only times people come are when they are upset. And it's often, it's my impression that it's not that the board doesn't welcome it, it's just that's not that satisfactory a way to really feel like heard or like your issues are going to be addressed, because it's so limited and it's this, you know, sliver of time where, you know, I think this committee was formed to try to provide better opportunities than just that one place at the start of a business meeting.
And it's always just a one-way conversation.
Correct.
So,
We're not supposed to respond.
right. So that,
Yeah. And that's really typical of a Robert's Rules run,
Mhm.
you know, public institution. The select board operates pretty similarly. Town meeting, well, town meeting's different.
So that's just kind of for that first 5-minute section of your agenda. The rest of the time, if we're here, it's okay to comment more personally what's coming up for us. You know?
This agenda is the template we use for all of our meetings, but this particular, and so at a regular board meeting, we would have an opportunity for the public to offer public comment at the beginning. Then the board would have their meeting and the public could observe, but they're not invited to participate. It's the board work. And then there would be another opportunity at the end for the public to comment again on anything they saw or heard or didn't get to say at the beginning. this group, I use that agenda because it's the standard template we always use to warn our meetings, but this group is a unique mix of board and community members. And because of that, I kind of relax the public comment rules a lot. And that way it's just more of a conversation. So I'm sorry if in reading the agenda, you felt like limited by what you could say.
I kind of did, I have to say.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
I'm glad to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And maybe Krista, just by, to help further clarify, if anyone has concerns that relate to a legal matter or to personnel, to people who are employed by the district, there is a procedure, a process for people to use to help get those concerns addressed, but it isn't at a public meeting. And maybe you could just explain very briefly what a person does if they have concerns like that.
Yeah, sure. So there's a chain of command like most organizations. So if, for example, you're a parent who has a concern with something happening in the classroom, if you went right to try to approach the board about that concern, we would encourage you to go back to speak with the classroom teacher first. And if that was not resolved satisfactorily, to then speak with the building principal. And if that didn't resolve it, then to speak to the superintendent. And then if that didn't resolve it, you can ask to bring your concern to the board, and it would be in an executive session where the public was not invited. And yeah, I think, is that what you're getting at, Nancy? That there's, yeah. So, number one, because it's important to talk first to the person with whom you're having an issue and see if you can't work it out with that person or their immediate supervisor, because the board isn't in the day-to-day operations to know enough really oftentimes about each situation that's happening. And then also because if it did ultimately come to the board, it would be an executive session because we are not legally allowed to discuss individuals publicly if it relates to their performance at all. So, yeah.
Thanks, Krista.
Sure. I'm glad you asked the question, Jennifer, and you know, kind of plod along doing the same old and you forget that not everybody knows how these systems work. So I think that's important. Other questions or thoughts about what the role of this committee is?
Yeah, I'm not at all clear.
Okay, what questions do you have that you think might help you to be more clear? Are you looking at the notes document, Elisa?
I have them all of the ones I printed out right here, but
Okay.
None of it merely to me makes clear what is the role of this committee. I can't really tell from these documents.
Okay, so the one that says that the document that I put in the chat, and it has a link that says, or that you can click on in the chat, but it's the top of the document says role of the school board.
Yeah, we got
That's
that.
the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and you've read that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first part of that talks about what the school board is responsible for doing, and that this is a committee of the school board. So we're our primary goals are to connect with the community around the work at the school board level, which is district-wide vision, direction, policies, and that we're charged with trying to find ways for community members to, like we were talking about earlier, to provide input and feedback, and to also share back out information with the community about what we're doing. And then, like Nancy was mentioning, to create a structure for that work so that it isn't just based on a particular issue that might arise, but that we're regularly have ways that we are giving people opportunities to provide input to the board about what the district is doing. So that's kind of our function. And we have two sorry, I'll pause there. Questions about that?
Yeah, I mean, so from what you just said and from what I read, I guess that we're supposed to figure out how to meet with the community and somehow get data from them about what they think is important. That's the only thing I can figure out. I mean, what,
Liz, I can't tell if you're trying to say anything, but I can't, your lips are moving, but I can't hear you.
We,
can you hear me
yeah,
now?
There you go.
yeah, I'm excited because I like how you put out our plan, right? We had that document of the draft MAUSD equity anti-racism plan. And then when I look at the Addison Northwest Supervisory District, and I'm sure you have it, and so I'm sure they so they did community engagement under section 2 for them of their initiative was community circles, right? I like that they use the word, how can we make this a safe school for each and every student? And how can we make it a safe community for each and every student? And it is focused on race and equity. So I think it's interesting. I think that's a very I think that's a good framework. I think it's very open-ended word to use. And then because that could really go to a lot of areas of equity. How do you feel safe, right? So that could kind of be a I don't know. I just like some of what they did, and I like the idea of kind of looking at their plan to maybe help move our work forward, because so much learning has been done in conversation that might be a really good way to make to make an impact on our community and with our students, because I definitely invited some students to join us here, but I think it's hard. I think they're not really sure. I don't think I was able to be really clear about what we were interested in knowing from them. But if they were with other students, or we even went in during a fit block, I mean, I don't know. I like what you gave us because it prompted a lot of thoughts for me about how to engage in conversations. And I think we could do a lot of learning together as a community, just having good conversations together.
Mhm.
And I like what you're saying, Liz, and that was one of the things when I looked at that plan, and I thought, well, maybe this is a way that we could collaborate with ANWSD, and we could pull our resources together, and our community, the issues that we face are the same around race and equity, and we don't have to reinvent our own structure, although we want to make sure that it's meeting the needs of our community specifically. But I just think this would be a great opportunity for us to all work together, and seems like they've done a lot of work already. And some of the things you suggested at the last meeting looks like they're moving forward with. And just collectively, we could have, I think, a bigger impact with this work because we do integrate, we do spend time with, we're not in these silos, we're
Mhm.
communities that overlap. And so I would love to see if we could collaborate with the Virgins district and some of the work that they're doing.
Thank you both. I just wanted to say that I did do a little research on Winooski High School because I think there was actually, someone can remind me, there was a PBS documentary about their school, and ways in which they're handling anti-racism work in the school. And
Mhm.
I found some links. Their languaging on the website is quite impressive around anti-racism stuff. Especially they had a section for student demands. So that might be a part where students could get interested in, some of the things that they demands were like having a truth and reconciliation committee, launching an anti-racism committee. I liked this one, replacing a school, they called it a school resource officer with a trauma specialist, which I think because we've had harm done in the school, that might be something to think about and consider. And how to develop strategies for hiring teachers of color. And there are more, but they're, it was like just really clear language, which I hadn't seen. And I also liked the one that was just brought up about Virgins. I think there's some good wording in there. And maybe Winooski has a little bit more of a breakdown too. So I'll pop them in the chat and people could look at them if that's, something.
Yes,
I
thank
did
you.
send an email to try to reach out to see if I could make a connection and get more information. I haven't heard anything back yet, so I could keep following up with that. As many resources as we could get, like Liz was saying, if we could get people together, even in a Zoom forum, maybe to talk about how they got started, what we could do, how we could model, that also for our school.
Thanks, Jennifer. Deb, did you want to say something? I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, well, I guess I just have a very basic question that might make everybody go, oh boy. But you keep referring to race and equity, and I guess I'm wondering what you mean by equity, and if the goal is just tied to equity, or it's broader to include more anti-racist learning.
I think that's a really good question. And I don't know, does anyone else want to share their thoughts on that? I have thoughts, but I'd like to hear what other people think first.
I think I would hope it's broader. And I think in conversations with each other, it would become that way.
So, Liz, then you see this as not limited to, but kind of in progress process thing.
Right, because it seems like if we're being responsive to the input that we're receiving, that it will have to be flexible, right?
Okay, thank you.
And I guess my response to that, I don't know if anyone's had the chance to read The Sum of Us. Heather, oh gosh, her last name is failing me. But she talks a lot about how anti-racist policies have harmed all of us. But I think that depending on your lens, your learning, your experience, you might not be as aware or see that. And I think that it's important to recognize that there are lots of ways folks in our community are left behind, left out. And if you are Black or brown, those factors are magnified. So I don't think it's a one or the other. I think it's a both. And I think that it would just be really interesting to hear from community members. And this is why I feel like this committee has an interesting opportunity to just And I also don't think we can do this work alone. It shouldn't be the work of the school board to have, I think we could be conveners and collaborators, but I think it's bigger than just the school board. But I think it would be really interesting to talk to folks about what equity means to them, because they might say anti-racist, oh, that has nothing to do with me. But then they might experience inequity that might be rooted in anti-racism. They don't even know that. They just know that they're marginalized in a very real way. And that's a pretty important thing for us to grapple with, I think, and to talk about as a community. So anyway, I don't know, that's maybe more than you were asking, Deb, but I think it's a both and, really. Elisa, are we getting to what your questions are though about? So I think this group is kind of twofold. One is we really need to create an ongoing structure for how we regularly connect with the community on any topic. And two, I'm particularly interested, knowing that I might not be on the board forever. I'd love to see some movement happen toward this issue of anti-racism equity. So I see this committee as being a vehicle for that. But I want to go back to Lisa and see if you still have questions or thoughts.
Well, it just seems to be becoming more clear that this committee needs to create public forums where people can talk and give information to the school board.
Yep.
I think, yes, it's great to do that. It's wonderful to do that and get information. I think that what's niggling in the back of my brain is that we'll only be getting information from people that are white. I think we'd have to really strive to try to make sure that we involve the BIPOC people in the community and somehow entice them to come to the meetings, which would be very uncomfortable.
You know, oh, sorry.
I think, yeah, I can't quite. There's something about the word equity that challenges my mind too, Deb, and it has something to do with, and I'm sorry that I can't read an exact thing from one of these papers, but there was something about ensuring that all students have equal access to all the services of the school and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that hasn't happened for the children of color at the school. They have equal access. They already have that, but they don't feel safe in the school or part of the community. So it's not just about the board saying, we're going to grant you equal access if you have Black skin or you're brown or you're Asian. You know that they already know that, they already have that. But what's the step beyond that the school might need to take to ensure, like what Liz said, that all students feel safe in the school? There's a gap there. Like, well, I don't want to skip over the gaps in the process of just talking with other white people in the community that have really maybe not an experience of what it's like to be a person of color in Bristol and in Manabe, right? Like how do we get that in to these conversations without having people of color try to teach us what to do and put the burden on their shoulders? So yes, I think it's great to involve the community, but then I get concerned that the community is going to be the same white
Mhm.
people making the same decisions for people of color without really understanding what those decisions, the ramifications of that might be. So
Yeah.
I get it. And
Yeah.
I got this niggling feeling like there's something that we need to do to close that gap.
Alyssa, what you say also makes me wonder about what might be the advantages and disadvantages of expanding the conversation about equity so that we're not talking only about race or about that we're also talking about income, and we're also talking about disability, and we're also talking about sexual orientation. I mean, I wonder, because I think while I think there are all kinds of inequities that are built into our system, and I just wonder about expanding or having opportunities to think about equity broadly, as well as specific to specific kinds of inequity.
Yes, I agree with that. I think where I come down on this subject is that there is a difference between racism and equity, in that equity is broad and it applies to all of these different groups that you mentioned, Nancy. But racism is a structure upon which our community was built.
Well, so is income inequality.
It is, except for there's definitely a difference between the income inequality of a Black person and a white person. So racism is so systemic that it's easy to just think of it as equity, but to me, it's more of a re-education of how our systems have been built on the shoulders and the backs of people of color. And how and where, when did we become white, like, and why is there a difference, and all of that the intricacies of racism. I mean, the school board is based on racism. The white community of Bristol is based on racism. There is no way that it's not. I mean, I look back at, in the, I'm just learning now the true history of my country, and I don't want my 5-year-old great-granddaughter to come to me when she graduates from high school and goes to college and says, "You knew all this, Gigi? You knew all this history and I never got it in school either. Why didn't you do something about that?"
So I just want to make sure you understand that what I said was, I'm wondering about, I don't know the answer. I'm wondering about what are the advantages and disadvantages of convening groups to talk about equity broadly across different marginalized groups versus talking about it specifically to a particular marginalized group. And I think that's a question that we as a group, our committee will do well to explore, not before we take action, but while we're taking action.
I agree. And I, at the same time, with my agreement, I think that the topic of anti-racism is a standalone topic, as well as the whole equity question, all the different types of inequities.
I guess,
Oh, go ahead, Deb. Go
I
ahead.
guess that's what I was going to say too, as I'm listening to everyone. I almost see two areas. The equity question is really important for a wide range of people. but it's only a step to the door, whereas anti-racism talks about cultures and it talks about ways of learning and topics of learning, and it's more of an equalizer instead of an equity, just an equity question, I think. So I think there's two important issues here, but I don't think you can drop either one of them. That's kind of what I wanted to say.
Yeah, this is a great conversation. And I think that when we get to the point of deciding that we might want to undertake this work, I think that it just speaks to the need to both invite other people to help us frame what that might look like, and also be really creative in all the ways that we try to connect with folks. And I want to come back to this, but before we move to the next part of what I wanted to talk about, I wanted to just say to your concern, Elisa, that I had the opportunity to hear from some folks working up in Barton in the Northeast Kingdom. They are thinking about designing a community hub, and they wanted to connect with different community members. They wanted to hold a workshop to hear, or a listening session to hear from community members about what a community hub would look like for the citizens of Barton. And I'm having a really hard time remembering the other town that either Barton is within or within this other town. Anyway,
Is it Irisburg?
no, it's another town. I don't think it's Irisburg.
Is it Hardwick?
Mm,
Is it
maybe
Hardwick? Or Coventry?
Coventry. I think it was Coventry.
But Chris,
Um,
you said a community hub, is that what you, HUB?
Correct.
hub?
Yes. So the Northeast Kingdom Collaborative has got a grant through the Working Communities Challenge grants. And each community got to focus on a different area that they wanted to invest this money in, revitalizing or sustaining their community. Some folks are focusing on housing. This particular group in the Northeast Kingdom wanted to create a community hub. And they have lots of challenges up in the Northeast Kingdom that are the same and different from ours. But what really struck me, because I've had the chance to do these sorts of listening sessions that we're talking about trying to figure out. I've had the chance to do them in some other communities. And you're right, Elisa, it is really hard to get folks other than the regular players to come. And for people to feel safe. And you can do different things like affinity groups and different ways, free childcare and food at different times of day. And all of that is great. But this group in Barton, it was a group of organizers. I can't remember the name of their organization, but it was like 2 or 3 women, a younger woman, younger than myself, and then an older woman and maybe somebody else. And they were going door to door in their community and talking to folks. And the questions were I think they had like 2 questions. What are you concerned about in your community? And I forget what the other one was. But it just made me think that this work to really connect with people in our community, especially people who are not feeling like they're part of the community for one reason or another, it's a really heavy lift, but it requires connections way beyond Zoom meetings or even open houses at Holly Hall. And that's why I think and I remember when this group did some work like that, where we each identified 5 people to just have a conversation with, buy them a cup of coffee or tea, people that were outside of your immediate bubble, and just talk about, we had like 5 questions about education in our community or whatever they were. But so you need a lot of people to really help move that forward, to get those connections and to have those conversations. And they serve so many purposes. One is just, yes, thank you, Northeast Kingdom Organizing. Yeah, that's the group. It's not rocket science. It's just, we're so like insulated in our bubble now. And I actually had to get last minute, I realized that my term was actually up on the school board and I did want to run for another term and I had to get signatures for my petition and I only had the weekend to do it. And I was kind of complaining. And then I actually just walked around Bristol and just walked up to people and asked them to sign. And I was like, this is why we have to do this.
Mhm.
This is why, because you have to talk to people that you don't know and just introduce yourself. And so anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but so this committee can't do all of that, but we can be like a convener of people who want to do some of that. And the end result is many layered. It could be just developing relationships. It could be building trust. It could be some folks like Kim say, hey, I want to do a really cool thing around migrants in Beaman. For the school board, the big hook is how can it influence policies so that before we build a new building or choose a curriculum or hire a superintendent, that we know what are the ways in which kids feel they're not all included, or what are the ways in which we might think they have access, but they really don't. Like, how do we evaluate our policies? So anyway, I think this is an ongoing conversation, and I think this is a good place to start it, but I understand the concerns and they're all real and they're all really important to keep talking about and to get more people to help think about how to mitigate some of them.
Can I say one thought before you move?
Yeah.
to the next phase, but
Yeah.
one thing I was thinking about in terms of, because on a number of things I read, they talked about community study circles.
Mhm.
And then and when we're thinking about equity and how to do these kind of with a study circle. So my experience is often if there are many different things around equity, racism is kind of the last thing people would like to talk about, let's say.
Mhm.
And I agree, all of them are equally important. So maybe the circles have specific focuses, like if there was one that was focused on income, one that was focused on disabilities, one that was focused on sexual orientation, one that was more specifically focused on racism and, the idea of what is even anti-racism, because a lot of people are afraid of that term, or they don't know what it means or how to define it or break it down. I do think that it's helpful to get leadership for those study circles, that we may not be the most equipped people to run them. So I would love to see if there are resources to, hire out. And we did find one that's obviously Mom and Deb and I, we have a, we have a passion for the anti-racism work, and I don't want to get in the way of any of the other work. I was involved heavily with disability work in my youth. That's what I studied in college, and I'm passionate about that as well. Love to, but I think it's important to get people with skills in those particular areas. Gender also is it needs someone who really understands, and there have been some community forums in Bristol that have brought in specific folks. But what kind of resources, or policies might we put in place to, have those ongoing, not just sort of a one-off, how would that look? And I would love at some point, with the anti-racism piece in particular, around what are our policies for engaging the staff in learning anti-racism work specifically. I think because again, you can't expect people to teach or do what you don't yet know or haven't yet done in your own personal work. You know what I'm saying? So that's the other, anyway, I'll just throw that in the ring, but I know that might be for a different time period in this meeting, so I'll pass.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think if we come up with a vision of what this work might look like, we may have access to some funds from the school board, particularly to support bringing people in. And then if we partnered with other groups, we might be able to share some of that too. I want to also put, actually, I'm going to come back to that. Okay, so I just want to back us up a minute. Well, so we were on the sort of reviewing our work. And so I just, I think we've talked about that for a while, but I do hope that folks have a sense of what we might do. And I also want to say that if you ultimately decide this isn't the place where you want to put your energies, that's okay. I think there's lots of ways people decide to affect change in their community, and not every way is for every person. So I do want to say that. Okay, so before we come back to thinking about how to move a race equity plan forward, I want to go back to the ownership linkage conversation. And that's what Nancy was talking about earlier, which is how can we build a structure for regular ongoing connection with our community. It is part of the way that the board will monitor itself, is to have a structure, and then every year we look back and say, how did we do? You know, did we have a plan for regularly connecting with people, or did we miss certain parts of that plan? What went well, what didn't go well? How diverse were our connections? What did we learn from them? All of that. And so we're charged with really formalizing that. And I don't know what people think, but it seems like that could be a subgroup of people that, if you're interested in working on that, that could do that. Either we could meet as a full group and then set aside like breakout rooms where if folks want to talk about that, they could do that. And if folks want to talk about the race equity work, they could do that. And then we could come back together as a whole, or it could happen outside of this meeting. But we do need to kind of in tandem work these two goals forward in the limited amount of time we have together. So I don't know what people's thoughts are about that or interest in that work. And Erin, I don't know if you're able to chime in, but you wrote the interpretation of that plan that we need to come up with and had some thoughts there as well. So
yeah, I guess my opinion of what it is hasn't changed a whole lot. I don't know. I'm sort of waiting to figure out what this group wants to do as far as what it wants to do for outreach, or what it finds important about education outcomes, or what are the more global things we're worried about. I know that we're trying to pinpoint, people are interested in certain really specific topics and how they relate to the global picture. But I think for the linkage plan to work, it needs to be a more global look at all the issues and how we design a way to make sure that we're looking at all of that. So we can, it's basically a checks and balance of the work we say we're doing. So my opinion of it hasn't changed. I'm just sort of waiting for figuring out the direction we all think it should go.
thanks, Erin.
You know, what occurs to me is that whether we're talking about racism and anti-racism, or whether we're talking about equity in relation to different marginalized groups, or whether we're talking about school safety as a community, or almost any other kind of issue related to our schools and communities, one of the things we need in order to make the conversations we need to have effective, and conversations that aren't just a flash in the pan, but happen in an ongoing way with multiple different people, is that we need good facilitators. And the district has, over many years, partly related to work that I was involved in when I worked for the district, we did quite a lot of work that could be picked up related to training students, particularly high school students, and also grown-ups. And at that time it was staff and principals, but it could be anyone, in effective facilitation skills. I mean, those are skills that can be taught, and they can be made applicable to all kinds of situations. So when I look at the Addison Northwest plan, and I look at the plan that seemed to be forming for MAUSD, we're talking about facilitated sessions for the board, study circles for community members, events like the Listen Up piece with facilitated follow-up conversations, a community-wide reading of a book, a common book, community advisory councils, collecting. It just seems to me that all of that hinges on being able to call on really a cadre of kids and grown-ups who can facilitate conversations and make sure people who attend them are feeling safe in those conversations. So that's simply, I mean, no matter what we settle on, I think that whatever structures we use to achieve our goals will depend on that cadre of facilitators. And we can certainly hire people from the outside, but if we're talking about building a system that's sustainable, we really need to develop a cadre we can call on over time.
I love that idea. I remember Sue McCormick did a facilitator training, or we talked about doing one, and was really big into having student adult partnerships as well.
And there is a great there's a great organization. I'm trying to think of what it's called, but it's now run by a teacher.
Up with Learning.
Say again.
Up with Learning.
Yes.
With John Kidda.
Yes, and I don't know if there was a former Mount Abe middle school teacher who was running that organization after Helen Beatty left. So
yeah. So how should we tackle creating this plan while also thinking about how to do the plan, specifically around anti-racism and equity?
I think I'd like to just repeat the opportunity to work with ANWSD and possibly have some conversations. Again, they're further down the road. They've had this part of the conversation already, and I just feel like it could shorten the timeline for us if we do that. And not that the work that it would take to get us to where they are isn't important. I just don't think it's going to be that different. And I think that we could use the expertise and pick and choose what makes sense for us and what doesn't make sense for us. I'm not saying it's a template. I feel like it's an opportunity to kickstart what we want to do and really see where we could collaborate and where we might go off and do our own based on the needs of our own community. Krista, do you know who's running that committee? You do?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be doing their board training for them.
Oh.
we're going to do a workshop on inclusive community engagement practices, and then a workshop on white supremacy culture.
Oh, great.
But that's specifically for the board. But I've been in contact with the superintendent and Sheila Sewells, and then their equity coordinator, Monica DeRoche, I think is her name. And originally I had reached out to them for this group's purpose to find out more about what they were doing. I'd heard what they were doing, and my initial, and they're open to collaboration. But then they wound up asking me if I would do this facilitated board training. So I got kind of focused on that. That hasn't happened yet, but that's at their reorganization meeting in March. But I think there could be opportunities there for sure. Yeah.
What would it look like to explore that idea?
I mean, I'm wondering if this group would want to first decide that we wanted to recommend that type of structure or that idea. It seems like we would need to say, hey, we like the way this is structured, or we think it's a good place to start, and then bring that to the board for them. I think they'd probably say, sure. And then I could reach out to their folks to just see what collaboration would look like. They haven't, I will tell you, they did do some study circles already. They did not have very good attendance. So that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It just means they didn't have good attendance, but maybe they would want to repeat some things, and maybe that would bring more folks together. I don't know how far along they are with some of the other work they're doing.
Maybe I missed this, but was for this training of the staff or school board, or
Yep.
who is doing the training of the white supremacy culture? And can you just repeat that? Maybe I missed.
Yeah, I'm doing that training. So I've done some work like this with other school boards and municipal groups, and got experience in that work with Sue McCormick, who worked with our district, and she is the co-founder of the Creative Discourse Group. And so they help communities have hard conversations, essentially around a variety of topics, but using a lot of materials that we've co-developed. I did a similar workshop with the Vermont School Nutrition Association folks, and through that was recommended to do this with their school board. And it felt appropriate because first of all, they're all white, middle-aged people like me, and school board members. So I feel like we have that similar affinity. Yeah.
So just in case this isn't, the Addison Northwest plan isn't in front of everybody. So
Oh yeah, I was going to put that in the link. Yeah,
it's
or in the
got
chat.
different pieces and parts to it.
Correct.
Part of it is facilitated sessions for the board to help them identify and address systemic issues of institutional bias, deficit-based schooling, and low expectations associated with race, class, culture, and language, gender, and sexual orientation, and disability or special status. I won't read the whole thing, but there are sessions for the board. There are study circles for the community, facilitated. There's a screening of an event, the Listen Up the musical, although, I mean, anyway, it's an event with follow-up. It looks like facilitated follow-up. And then there's also a community-wide invitation to read a particular book. In this case, a book around the theme of anti-racism and anti-bias. So, it's one of the things I love about the plan it's got multiple levels. It's got multiple audiences. It's definitely not going to get to everyone, but it's a beginning of you know, a broad conversation across a large number of people. So certainly it would have, once that plan is implemented, or a plan like that for us, or us with them, I mean, that will lead to other revelations about what to do next. But it's a nice multifaceted beginning anyway. And I
Right.
think, like you said, Kim, if we could collaborate, and Krista, if we could collaborate with them, we would have a jump start on getting moving. And we'd also have some experience with some different structures that would be useful in all kinds of situations on all kinds of topics.
Yeah, if you didn't see, I put the description of their plan in the chat. And so the part I'm helping with is the board education part. So it's kind of a peer-to-peer thing,
Yeah,
but there are a lot of layers to it.
yeah.
I was just gonna add in the chat, but could you put that, the creative Discord group?
Yep.
Like just to check them out. Where
Yep.
are they based in Vermont or somewhere?
Yep. Yep. So Sue McCormick was creative discourse on her own, and now she has a partner, Nadia Mitchell. She was Nadia Du Bois, and so they changed their name to the Creative Discourse Group, and they have a team of, there are like 12 or 14 of us associates, just not just in Vermont, but all over, with different experiences, and they pull us in for workshops and things that they're doing, depending on our own experience and skills and the needs of the folks they're working with. And so, yeah.
I'd also like to think that if we could collaborate, that we could get a better turnout. You know, I think, you know, that's always been a hard thing for us in terms of engaging our community, and that if it's a collective effort between the two communities, I just in my, you know, my experience of organizing events and talking to groups of people to try to bring them together, that it would be more successful. And doing the Listen Up, you know, or the list, is that what it's called? Listen Up musical.
Listen Up.
You could do it in Virgins and do it in Bristol, and people
Mhm.
could come, you know, if you live in the 5 towns, you could come to Virgins, or if you live in the Virgins district, you can come to Bristol. But it's just more opportunity, and it's another night, and it's another a community circle that, you know, might introduce people who are like-minded and want to have conversations and want to work together to make change. And yeah, it just can be very inspirational to have a wider group of people, smaller, more insulated group. So I love that idea. And are you willing to talk to them, Krista, about
Mhm.
the possibility of us? And would you facilitate the same kind of thing for our board? I mean, is that the kind of thing that you're talking about?
I mean, if that's something this group decides that we want to do, I think I had already mentioned to Patrick that I was doing this for them, and he was like, "Oh, you should do that for us." I said, "Well, then you can't pay me if I do it for our school board, but I would do it anyway." But the only thing I'm thinking is, you know, I think that all makes sense. I'd be happy to reach out to them. And I think there's a lot of pieces of this that could work. And also, I just wonder if we would want to invite anybody else to this conversation about what we might do first, or also, or in addition. I was hoping to have some students here and wasn't able to get any. I don't know, maybe the work builds on itself and more people get involved as you go.
Can I also say that when I look at the when I think about those levels that are described in the Addison Northwest Plan, and also when I think about the worry about not getting a great turnout, I really think it might be useful to consider a town-based part to the plan,
Mhm.
because I think that might be a way to bring more people to the table, especially, I don't know if, I guess all of our towns have town libraries. Is that right? I think that
Yep.
the partnership with the libraries is an intriguing piece
Mhm.
too. But I'm wondering about Alyssa's question about how do we bring people of color to the table? What, why would they come
Yeah.
to an event organized by a bunch of white people?
Nice white ladies. Yeah.
One thing
Yep.
to possibly consider, I know whenever I've been attending workshops where there are both people of color and white people in a group, that there will be parts of the time when it's just the people of
Mhm.
color in their group and the white people in their group.
Yep.
So we might see if we can help to create a BIPOC caucus.
Yep.
In other words, if we can find one person of color in our community that might be willing to facilitate a
Mhm.
conversation between the other mixed race or mixed cultured families in town and people of color families in town together to talk safely in their group without questions and drilling down from white people that might want to listen in, and then have that person come to one of our meetings and relay that information. It's just
Yeah.
possible thought that I had. Jennifer, maybe you can speak more to that because I know you have more experience with it.
Sure. Well, and one other thought is that it's always great. I mean, I hear what you said, Krista, about, you're comfortable with it because you're basically teaching to people that look
Mhm.
like you.
Yeah.
I think it will be important for the community forums to have both
Mhm.
a white facilitator and a facilitator of color.
Yeah.
I think, and that's why I was thinking if there were for outside resources, there may be, and we sort of researched one that we took a workshop with. Maybe Mom will say a little bit more about that, but we got, some good information that they would be willing. This would be more specific to curriculum, but I think that the community circles could be a possibility also. But they have been years of skilled work in this particular area. Because the one we're looking at is just focusing on race now, I'm sticking with that. But, of course, for any equity forum you decide to do, I think it would be important to try to seek out diversity there also. That's my opinion, but of course, for the ones dealing with racism, it's really important to have that leadership for people to see that leadership. So if we can't find it in our community specifically, I think outside help would be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And community spaces they really help to make people feel safe, and also, for white people too, that, this is challenging material to talk about. And so it can make people feel safer to not make a mistake or, feel okay about, so it goes both ways with the affinity circles and groups.
There's a woman, I think she might also have done some work with the Creative Discourse Group, Tabitha Moore. I think she might have also been in the legislature. But anyway, she's been working with the Bristol town manager and community member Porter Knight, who's been hosting a lot of the conversations in town, but Porter got a grant so that I'm pretty sure it's Tabitha, but anyway, so that this woman could work with each of our municipal committees to go through a required training, and then they're building an equity lens and evaluating their internal and external documents. And they're doing some really great and very tangible work, and it's mandatory for any paid town employee to attend, and then strongly encouraged for volunteer run committees to participate as well. But anyway, I just wonder if maybe there's a way to see if she would consider doing other work in our community, since she's already doing something here, but with our group. That's just somebody I thought of. But sorry, go ahead.
Just gonna, a former colleague of mine, he was a teacher in the Winooski district and one of the only Black teachers, and he resigned because of the racism within the district. And he might have a very interesting lens to, to bring, and he might be willing to just come and talk with us about this work. There's a 7 days article. I can put the link in here for you if you want to read about it. But I think that there's people out in the community like that who might be able to inform us and really help us make sure that we're undertaking this work with as wide a lens as we possibly can. And that's my fear, again, that we're all about the same. And I just want to make sure that the work that we do is, as I said, it has the broadest perspective, and isn't something that's coming from us, really. We can help get it started, but I think that it's got to be from people that truly understand what the need is, and then what all of the pitfalls are that we're likely to fall down through. So I'll put this in the chat. You can take a look, and I'd be happy to reach out to him if you think he might be somebody who could come and just chat with us about this work.
That makes me think about two other things, Kim. One is that one perspective that I think would be valuable that Ann Wallace was going to try to collect for us is information about what the school is already doing. What conversations are underway? How are they? Have you been back in touch with her, Krista?
A little bit, but I did also, thank you for saying that, because I also, at our last board meeting, Katrina DiNapoli, who's the assistant superintendent, was speaking to some of the different work they're doing specifically around curriculum, but I think it was more based on trying to, it wasn't anti-racism work. It was really like equity in access to math, particularly like looking at universal design and ways to ensure that all kids can access materials. But she started talking about all these different things that are happening in the district. And I asked Patrick to write up some of the equity work that's happening for me to share with this group. And I'm going to put it in the chat right now because he did put together a document for me. So we have a strategic plan, and there are 4 goals, and one of them is equity. And within that goal are lots of different kinds of things. And what I understand is that there are pockets of things happening both around anti-racism work and around equitable access to education, regardless of your circumstances. That's all sort of happening in different pockets in different ways across all of our schools. But we don't have a So there's good stuff happening. There's lots more to be done, especially around the anti-racism piece. A lot of work happens by the interest or passion of particular teachers or students or community members who bring things forward that they want to do. A lot of work is happening in our district around social and emotional learning because there are a lot of kids who are really struggling in many different ways. And then we're also looking at a lot of academic loss because of COVID. So embedded in so many of those different lenses is the desire to reach all kids. But you can see in this document some of the different things that have been happening in the past. I guess this is mostly last year. And I think, I don't know if Patrick ran out of time, but he sent this to me today, but I see like Beeman we could definitely add the migrant worker stuff. So there's lots happening, but it's not all necessarily under one systematic plan. And also, I'm not sure how much evaluation of this is happening, or how it's meeting particular needs and whether or not it's successful in meeting those needs. So, but I thought it would be important to share this with everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to go back to this idea of doing something like Addison Northwest. And what I'm wondering, to move this forward, we'd have to bring it to the board to say this is a plan that we think could work for us. And our next meeting to do that as a board would be the 28th. And I'm wondering if this group could take some time outside of this meeting to look at that plan that I sent. And it was just in the chat, but if you need help finding it, you can let me know. But maybe to really look at it more critically and to ask yourself if there's anything that you have questions about, what you like about it, what you might want to change. Is there anything that or places where you think that really speak to collaboration, anything that you would want to flesh out more before we share it with the board and say, we'd like to see how this could work. We'd
Do
like
you
to
mean the Addison Northwest plan?
No, yes,
Which
the
plan?
Addison Northwest plan.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I
Okay.
just think that plan is just a great place to start anyway.
Mhm.
And I appreciate that you shared, and even though I know it's not complete, the document from Patrick, I just think that, yeah, I think that's a good place, and that we could do our own community work, but use this as a basis for getting the conversation going, certainly. And then if there is opportunity for collaboration, to find out where it makes sense and where it doesn't make sense. And
Mhm.
I mean, I think I would suggest a town-based piece to it, in addition to what is there. And I also think to make it a bit more systemic, to consider some kind of plan around building a cadre of student and grown-up facilitators, because the conversations need to go on beyond what's outlined in this plan.
Yeah, and I think, Nancy, that was work that they were doing with a group of students. I think it's called Full Send, is their student leadership group. And that group was getting trained to then facilitate these study circles. So
Yep.
It would be interesting to hear a little more about exactly how that's working. I'm pretty sure. So we have community council at Mount Abe, which is awesome. And then I think there might also have been a newly formed student leader group as well. But anyway.
I guess what I'm suggesting, which only becomes clear to me when I try to explain it, is that the board, if there's something like this is going to be presented to the board, that it be important that they understand that these are structures, that these are examples of structures that could be part of
Mhm.
a sustainable,
Yeah, yeah.
ownership linkage plan.
So I wonder to that point, if it would also be good, maybe there's a couple folks who would be interested in looking at our ownership linkage charge and this plan to see where they kind of see how this plan kind of could help inform be really deliberate about what you're saying. I'm
Yeah.
not finding my words, but I think you're right that the way that Addison Northwest is doing this, it hits a lot of the sweet spots of an ongoing process, but it might not be all the things. And I do want to try to get us to really flesh out an ongoing plan. So I think this anti-racism work example gets us some of the way there. I don't know, maybe it's everything, maybe it's not, but that would be a great help, would be to be able to share with the board, this is some anti-racism and equity work we think we might undertake, and there are components of this that could be used in lots of different ways around other issues. And here are some other components that we think we want to build in to our ownership linkage plan.
Well, I'm happy to work on that with you, Krista.
That would be awesome.
I
Thank
think
you.
one of the other pieces that seems missing from what's it called again? Addison, whatever.
Northwest, yeah.
For me, the missing part is that the training is for the board, but I think we really, I would like to see an added piece in, for training for staff or teachers at the school, specifically around anti-racism curriculum, or at least begin to develop what that could look like, or propose resources that could go towards that specifically. So that the teacher, the teachers have skills, or the staff have skills to be bringing that in directly to the school. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think that what I wonder if the way this would work would be that we would have this board training and raised awareness, so that we then see what the needs are in our district. We would also have these community circles, and then we would make recommendations that might include training for teachers. So it isn't necessarily the board's role to make those trainings happen. It's our role to strongly suggest that they happen. I don't know if that's clear. Maybe Liz or Erin can help me articulate what I'm trying to say.
I think it helps us ask the question about what has happened in the area, right? So I know, we know, for instance, now that we are informed about some of the trainings, we know there's a social emotional lens, trauma-based lenses happening right now, kind of opening up those areas, right? And training in those areas. So we can certainly, it helps us ask the question of what has happened for training on these topics, and what the plans may be for
more.
fitting them in. Yeah.
Because I do think there's more to know about that.
Yeah.
And that will be, I do wonder whether Ann Wallace did get a chance to reach out to her colleagues who are working in the school, or former colleagues, before she went away. So it'll be good for us to follow up about that.
I can just relay that Anne did meet with at least one person. And I don't know if her name was on the meeting change for tonight. She's out west, and she was going to come to the Zoom, but I'm not sure if she got
She reached out and said she wasn't but she said she was going to be in transit, or she wasn't able to make tonight.
She'll come next time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add a couple things if there's time. I don't want to keep everybody really late.
No, I think we're good.
I think that it's important to add to the Virgins plan, this idea of running small groups with more specific, in more specific areas, like a group that might come, that are interested in talking about the needs of gender issues, a group that might come talking about disabilities, a group that might come talking about anti-racism for white people, a BIPOC caucus, a student caucus, with facilitators that can do the work of those groups. Sometimes I think that that's missing from the plan, is that the groups are for specific populations instead of, and so then I kind of wonder, maybe that's why not a lot of people are attending. Maybe if I'm just using this as an example, but maybe if I might not be able to come to a big group and talk about my own gender identity in a really big group that's there to talk about many things. Does that make any sense? Like
Yeah.
it's a more safe container for the conversations to be had more completely and honestly,
Mhm.
without rebuttal from the group in some way.
Mhm.
And so I think that there's a big value to that. I would also just want us to really think about the people that we have facilitate the groups. It's
Mhm.
been my experience that if it's a diversity, equity, and inclusion business or person that does that for a living, that they're not necessarily going to bring a good picture to the group on the whole. That it's better to work with organizations that go beyond DEI and really look the subject dead in the eye, instead of checking all the boxes that we say and do the right things at meetings. And it needs to be the kind of facilitator that can hold emotional space in a really good way. So I would recommend in a couple of organizations that I've been working with already are the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, and the Center for the Study of White American Culture. And they would be able to give us some kind of quote as to what that might cost to help with a group. And it might not be in person. That would be one thing to think about too. But there may be other people locally that could do something a bit beyond what a DEI person could do, which I think is really important. And the last thing I wanted to say is just to ask Krista, do you know, is the Mount Abe Anti-Racist Coalition, is that still in existence, or did that dissolve?
Yeah, I think, and my knowledge is only based on my two kids who were involved in it. And it was a student organization. And they're not meeting. It kind of fizzled a little bit. Yeah. But I was thinking about when you were talking about different affinity groups, and which I think is really important, that there is now, I think it's maybe just middle school, maybe high school too, but there's a Gay Straight Alliance, which was quiet for a while and has now gained some more momentum. I'm trying to think if there's any other affinity groups, but that has a faculty member mentor, and that's kind of a built-in potential partnership to maybe facilitate conversations around sexual orientation and or gender, if we were to have a group
And
focused on that, that's already built in. So that's kind of cool.
I would really encourage everyone to go and spend a little time on the Winooski website and look at the student plans that Jen brought up earlier. It's very, very incredible, the work that they're doing there. And I think a partnership with them would also be as valuable, if not more valuable, than the partnership with Virgin's group. And I also wanted to talk about this book that I just got, and I haven't started it because I just got it. It's called Rise for Racial Justice, How to Talk About Race with Schools and Communities.
Hmm.
And I know one of the writers of the book. She's with the Center for the Study of White American Culture. It might be something that we as a group might want to do as a collective read
Hmm.
so that we actually can get our own ground into the depth of the topic that a lot of us are interested in. Something to think about.
I would just like to echo what Elisa said about the Winooski work that they have done. I think the Addison Northwest is great. My concern is that you just have one other example to go from. Whereas if you have two, it kind of, it opens your mind up a little bit to different possibilities rather than just ping ponging off one. And I agree, it's great to not have to reinvent the wheel, but we also have to have a broadest base as we can to get ideas from. So I would like to do that. My other concern is, and we talked about this briefly, going to door, but how do you get people to come to these community things? Because it's, being a retired teacher, it's just not easy. People work all day, they have kids, they're not, it's really difficult to get people to come out. And I don't know if they're more likely to come to a Zoom meeting or less. I don't know if it's more effective or less effective to have a Zoom meeting rather than in person where it's more personable. I don't know the answers to that, and I'm not sure how to get people out, but I think that deserves some more thought too. Maybe asking these other districts how they approach that, because it's great to put all this work into it. And I mean, look at this group is that much smaller this time than it was last time. And that's kind of what happened in the, I can't remember what it was called, but Ray led the group last year. It was an anti-racism group. It started out huge and ended up fizzling out. So I think it's important to perhaps, maybe with these individualized interest groups, people will have more ownership. And once they get ownership, they'll continue to come. But that's a big issue, I think, is getting people.
I would also just say we are a small group, and I don't think just this small group of us can be entirely responsible for moving this work forward in our community. So, I don't, and it was sort of what I was trying to say before. Do we invite more people to this conversation about what this should even look like? Or do we just start to have conversations and more people will be interested and then help us think, some of the even basic questions? What should the model look like? What should we have affinity groups, or how can we get more people, and all those sorts of things? I think the more diverse the people are that are even thinking about it, the more robust the plan is, the more likely people are to participate. So that is a concern that I have, and I don't know that I have the capacity to totally spearhead the whole effort, but it requires a big commitment on the part of everybody. And we are a small group.
One question, Krista, that I would love to know from the ANWSD plan is they have the 3 different thought exchange questions. And I just wonder, is that something they're going to do after they do these, or like where does the community input come in? And I'm a big proponent of doing whatever we can to get the community to provide input right away. But again, it's how do you get people to participate? How do you get people to sort of understand what the question is? I like their questions, and I think that first one is really, would be really telling in terms of how it informs the work. But it could also be very telling in how it informs the success of the work. So
Yeah, and
So-
it looks like actually in their plan, it's to happen after. But I'm reminded of you know, I had a good conversation with Sue McCormick a couple of weeks ago about trying to do this work in our schools, and I think, you know, she was the one who was saying, maybe what if you started with an event like Listen Up as a way to bring people together, bring energy together, and then see and do a quick exit survey, but invite people to then be part of an ongoing conversation about how to have more of these, more education, connection, community, more impactful dialogue moving forward. So her thinking was kind of have something to get people's juices flowing, that then they fill out a quick exit card. Yeah, I'd love to talk more about this stuff, or I'm definitely interested, or anyway,
Well,
you just
I think
reminded
it's
reminded me of that.
yeah, and it's a great way to invite the community to participate, you know, I think.
Yeah,
Rather than,
'cause it-
saying, you know, there's a committee of people that are trying to get this work started and we'd like your input. I think it's, you know, to have something that people want to talk about and know more about, and that piques their interest. And I don't know, I think Sue's idea is a good one, so I'll just.
I agree. I agree.
you know, because I think that, and I haven't seen Listen Up, but from the clips I've seen and from talking to people who have seen it, what I understand is that it definitely hits on a lot of different otherisms, kids, and it's kids speaking about their experience. So that's sort of kind of compelling to people who might not otherwise maybe come out, but kids' experiences in a variety, you know, with a variety of different issues, but also it doesn't underestimate the added layer for Black and brown students. Like there's a very specific piece that really focuses on racism in Vermont. And so it kind of seems like it is that both and part of race and equity, but it's you know, it's an event that might be lower hanging fruit in terms of people coming out to see it. I don't know.
I think that's a great idea, and I think to do it at the high school, you know, in the auditorium, and invite families and community members, and I think that would be I think it'd be a great way to start the community conversations. Is there anything, Krista, anything else that we can do?
You know, giving feedback on what you see on the Addison Northwest plan is helpful. Giving feedback on how that could build on a more permanent community linkage plan is helpful. And I think then Liz and Aaron and I can bring back to the board some of these ideas and a recommendation for how we move forward. I guess what I'm not sure though, because I did just put out that idea of doing the Listen Up musical maybe first, what people think about that idea of starting with that as a kickoff to these conversations versus trying to have conversations with people first and then doing that screening. Because it's a different recommendation than the Addison Northwest.
Well, I guess
Or it's a different order.
I guess I want to say that if I put on the hat of a teacher or a principal at our high school, I'd want to, I would want to be in touch. I would want this group to know more about what we're doing in the high school before we initiate something like that, a big event like that. There's a lot going on in high schools right now around racism. I don't know what's going on in our high school around racism, or like I said, I feel like we need more information about that. But I'd certainly, an event like that, if I were a principal or a teacher, I'd want to be at least ready.
Mhm. Yeah.
Can I just say that I did write to Erin and asked her, because I was curious what was done in the schools regarding anti-racism,
You wrote to-
particularly
Who did you
Uh,
reach out to?
the vice principal, Erin.
Oh, Tebow?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yes.
Yes. And being a retired teacher, I know that teachers are doing stuff on anti-racism with all the current events that are going
Mhm.
on. And I know it was a really hard question to ask. But she basically sent me some policies, and then she kind of said it's too broad of a question to really answer. And I understand that, but I feel like you do, Nancy. How do we know where to start if we don't know what's going on now?
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, well, there's all kinds of thoughts I can go to from there, but that would take us 3 weeks to talk about what's going on.
But there will be a way to know, but we need to be intentional about inquiring.
Well,
Mhm.
yeah, and respectful.
Yep.
I'm not
Mhm.
trying to,
Yep,
Mhm.
I want the information, not the judgment. I just want to figure out what's going on, because it's, after
So-
being in meetings with students and hearing their hurt
Mhm.
and anguish, I was just very curious. That's it.
Liz? Yeah, thank you. Liz?
Yeah, I think a good action step would certainly be to check with our principal and get feedback on whether or not they feel that's the appropriate venue, right? And depending on that, Holly Hall is not tiny, right? And they have a nice screen in there they can pull down, I think. And the nice thing about having the screening happen first is that, much like in a classroom, you have the topic and then everybody's kind of thinking about the same, like it kind of
Mhm.
orientates the discussion, right? So we have a common base of knowledge. So we don't have to necessarily pull out of our own personal bucket, right? To
Mhm.
throw it out. We can kind of have a general conversation about the characters in the movie without it being like, that's kind of a nice way to be a little, I just like the idea. I like the idea of that. And then there's a sign up sheet in the back like, hey, so we're going to have this discussion here and then, grab some flyers.
Mhm.
Please join us to talk more. And then thinking about what those flyers say could be a project that we work on here. I don't know. That sounds helpful.
Yeah.
I wondered too, Nancy, about your question, like, finding out what happened or is happening in the schools around racism specifically. I mean, there may be some records for that, whatever the coalition was that started and did work. They may have some minutes or some things that would talk about why did that, I mean, there was a reason why that started in the first place. And so that must be documented somehow. I don't know, without, of course, giving any names, if there would be ways of finding out
sure.
specific incidences. I don't know.
7:58. And so I think what I'm hearing is that folks are interested in the idea of maybe leading with the screening, but with some exploration first and mindful connecting with our high school leaders to see how they might want to be, what they think of that idea, what's happening now, what's most pertinent to them. So yeah, maybe we'll start there. But in the meantime, I still would like some feedback on the rest of that plan that we looked at, because I think that would be really helpful. There's one other thing I was going to say. I've lost it. What other, maybe one of you will remind me, what other loose ends do we have besides the one rattling in my brain?
Well, I think we are washing loose ends, really.
Uh-huh.
But they're all good ones.
I guess the only thing I see on the agenda, and if you could send me a copy, an editable copy, I just did paper notes this time.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Sorry,
I-
Liz.
it's
I never remember to do that.
code, I didn't, I should have asked ahead of time as well.
No, it's okay.
So we, developing the ownership linkage plan, so that was gonna be Nancy and you. Do you feel like you want more support on that? Are you trying to bring that to the next board meeting? Is that something we'll look at as a group next time? What do you?
I would love it if, I mean, I don't know if you have the capacity, Erin, because it is something that you spent time on. Just maybe you and Nancy could connect and I could hand that in your direction.
Yeah, I could do that.
That'd be great. And then what I'll do is try to figure out a way to connect with our high school leaders around this idea we have and see what they think and get a better sense to bring back to our group of how that would land and what that might look like for them. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay. And we should be, I'm sorry, I've had to change our meeting so many times, but I just want to double check. We do not have, yes, we will be meeting on March 7th. And if there are other folks that you think might like to be part of the conversation of planning this work moving forward, please invite them. And I'm going to put out a call again to some more students. My own are busy with play rehearsal at this time. Actually, they're not on Tuesdays, so I might be able to get them to come, but we'll keep trying. All right, everyone, thank you so much, and for all the resources that were shared. And feel free to also share them in our email in case folks didn't pull them off the chat.
Thanks.
All right.
Krista. Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
so we're officially ending at 8:01. Thanks all. Have a great night.
You too.
Right.